of course, Mama's plant. You remember in that story that there is always a mention of a plant owned by Mama, and Mama is Lena, the eldest in the family. You remember, she has a small plant by the back of the compound, and there is always a complaint that the sun, the light rays coming into the house is not enough for the nourishment of this plant. The plant is quite symbolic. Yes, it symbolizes the entire family of Younger. Remember that light rays in this work is used to picture hope and success and survival. So as the plant, whatever Mama does to make sure that the plant succeeds, the plant still keeps growing out of frustration because of lack of nutrients, stunted growth, not well nourished, malnourished, which is a symbol of how the Younger family remain malnourished because of the claustrophobic environment they find themselves. That's the white environment, which does not allow them to grow above where they are, which stores their dream. So Mama's plant is a symbol of the condition of the Younger family in the white vicinity. So that lack of sunlight is lack of development resulting from the fact that they lived in a white neighborhood, or that they are dominated by the white. So eventually when Mama moves into a new apartment, there is a hope that there will be a good amount of sunlight, which would help the plants to grow luxuriantly, and by extension which will help the Younger family to achieve all other dreams. So the next symbol in this work is Benita's hair. At the beginning of this work, we see Benita with a very long white hair. That's long hair, the same way we see on the head of white ladies, which then shows that she is living in a white community and that she accepts the culture of the white community. But towards the end of the story, when she is now in a relationship with the Nigerian-born Joseph Asage, she changes her hairstyle to the African hairstyle. We see her coming up with Afro hairstyle on stage. That's to show you that she has decided to embrace the African culture, and of course that her dream of going back to Africa is on the way to being fulfilled. So that is equally a symbol. It's a symbol of embracing the white. That's to tell us that Lorian Hansberry has such vision of embracing. Of course, these are a statement to how Lorian Hansberry feels about the African culture. The next symbol in that work is sunlight. Sunlight is very, very important. And of course, we know for every planted thing, sunlight is very important. For the things planted to grow luxuriantly, they need sunlight. So that sunlight is symbolic of the life of the people of the Younger family. They needed sunlight. That sunlight there in that work would have meant a level playing ground for both the whites and both the blacks. It would have meant equality and justice that would have allowed everyone to grow very well, as it were, without inhibition of any sort, either that resulting from racism, or resulting from sexism, or resulting from gender discrimination. Just like the sunlight that was little, that was not enough, does not allow Mama's little plants to grow very, very well. So because of the lack of sunlight, the plant does not grow very well. No matter what Mama does, no matter how much water Mama pours on the plant remains stunted and malnourished because there was no sunlight. So no matter what Mama does to protect the family, that the Younger family, the family remains in poverty because the environment is a white environment dominated by the whites, controlled, constructed, and manned by the whites. So it becomes very difficult for one's dream to be achieved. So that is the symbol of the sunlight. And of course we know that the playwright carefully crafts this into the work. Now we are done with Lorian Hansberry's Erasing in the Sun. We have considered a number of issues, starting with the background of the work, background of the playwright rather. We talked about the background that Lorian Hansberry grew up in Southside Chicago in the United States of America. The parents were very rich, so they could afford a house in the white neighborhood. Of course, she she still maintained her black heritage. We've talked about the plot of the work, where we said that the plot has to do with emphasis, arrangement of events with emphasis on causation. We equally talked about the setting of the work, set in 1945, between 1945 and 1959, Southside Chicago. We talked about 3 themes: poverty, feminist struggle, racism. We discussed some characters: Walter Lee, Benita, Jenna Younger, Ruth Younger, and Travis Younger. Finally, we talked about the language and style. Now that will be it for the dramatic aspect of your syllable. Introduction to prose. Prose is a genre of literature different from other genres in a number of ways. First of all, prose is different from drama, from poetry. While drama is written in acts and scenes, prose is written in chapters and verses. Did I say verses? It's written in chapters essentially. And of course, poetry is written in lines and stanzas. Of course, in poetry, while we hear the voice of the poet personnel, in drama, all the characters talk about themselves. And of course, the costume and stage direction helps us to decipher exactly what the intentions of the playwright is. But for the prose, what we hear is the voice of a narrator. It could be a narrator who is a part of the work, a narrator who is equally a character. It could be the voice of a narrator who is outside of the work, in the case of a musician point of view. So these are the possible ways through which the writer or the novelist sends his or her message in the prose work. Now, talking about prose, we shall be talking about prose fiction. Of course, the prose is divided into 2, namely prose fiction and prose non-fiction, or the one you refer to as non-fictional prose. The prose fiction covers the novel, the novella, and of course the short story, while the prose non-fiction takes care of autobiography, biography, memoir, and of course the diary, the letters, essays, all of those rather fall under the prose non-fiction. But our focus in this class will be prose fiction, and specifically the novel. The novel is the largest among the novel, the novella, and the short story. So our focus today will be on the novel. Now we're going to be focusing on Bayo Adebowale's Lonely Days. The title of the novel is Lonely Days, and the author is Bayo Adebowale. Let us start with the setting of this novel. And don't forget, like I said in our last class, that the setting of the work takes care of both the time and place of the action. Talking about the time, we mean the temporal setting. For this novel, that is Lonely Days, it was set during the post-independence of Nigeria. And talking about the spatial setting, which is the place setting, it was set in Kofi village in the southwestern part of Nigeria. Now that's for the setting of this novel. You know why it is very essential to know the setting of a work of art. In a number of ways, it helps us to understand what the thematic preoccupation of the author is all about. Now we'll go over to the plot account. Talking about the plot account, I did tell you in our last class that the plot has to do with arrangement of events with emphasis on causation, as opposed to story, which is arrangement of events with emphasis on time. So when we say the queen died, that's a story. But when we say the queen died, the curse, the king died, that's the plot. Is that okay? Alright, assuming you understand that, we go over to the plot account of the novel Lonely Days. It's about the life of Yeremi as a widow. Yeremi is of course the protagonist of the story. From the beginning of the story, we see her having lost her husband about 9 months ago. So all of the things she passes through after the death of her husband forms the basis for the story. Now what happens? Of course, after the death of her husband, she only has Woye, which is the grandson, to stay with. And of course, this woman is a businesswoman, deals on dyeing of taffeta clothes, goes to the market to sell them, interacts with her grandson Woye, sings with him, tells him story about her life while she was growing up, compares her past to her present with the little boy. They go virtually everywhere together, and Woye loves her grandmother, his grandmother rather, very well. Now life continues. A time comes when, as a widow in the village, it is expected that she selects from a number of men who will be presented to her. And that was going to happen in what they call the cap picking ceremony. Now before that ceremony, a number of our friends who are widows, Dedewi, Radeke, and Foyoyin, these are 3 widows in the village, actually come to encourage her to make the right choice in her picking. Because of course the cap picking ceremony indeed actually means to pick a husband, that is to replace her dead husband Ajumobi. Now that day eventually comes, and she is to pick among the 3 caps set before her, which would mean the picking of one person to replace her dead husband. But before then, 3 persons had wooed her, and they are Ayewanle. Ayewanle, it's a drummer, the village drummer. Ayewanle meets Yeremi, tells Yeremi that he has the power to revitalize a barren land and makes the barren land bear fruit again simply by beating his drum. All this he says to capture the attention of Yeremi, who is now a widow. The other one is Olonade, who is equally not a drummer now. He is the village artist. He showcases all of his wonderful artistic creation before Yeremi in a bid to woo her to his side. But Yeremi is not swayed by all of those pretensions. The next person that woos her is Lanwa. Lanwa, of course, is the half-brother of Ajumobi, husband of Yeremi. Lanwa is a farmer, a very big farmer. He tells Yeremi how no member of his family can ever starve, and how he is going to make Yeremi live a wonderful life if Yeremi gives in to her demand of marriage. Now these are the 3 persons who are represented in the cap picking ceremony. So during the cap picking ceremony, Yeremi is expected to pick one of the cap, either that representing Lanwa or Ayewale or Olanade. Whichever she picks, that person becomes her husband. But to the chagrin of everyone present on that day in the ceremony, she comes, picks each of the cards, and causes serious abuses on each of the caps, representing each of the men, after which she walks away and leaves the vicinity back to her house. Of course, the only person she has to stay with is the grandson rather, Woye. But when she comes back home, the mother of Woye, which is Shaggy, the first daughter of Yeremi, comes back to pick her son, Woye. But not until they had interacted about the decision to either get married again or remain a widow. Of course, both Shaggy and the mother Yeremi decide that it's better for her to just remain after the death of her husband without picking another, or without allowing herself to be married off to another man. And so Shaggy goes back with Woye, who has hitherto been the only companion of Yeremi. Alani, that's the only son of Yeremi, comes back to visit her. That's after the cap picking ceremony. And of course, he showed what her father's belonging, hoping that the uncle did so, hoping that Alani would stay back in the village, that's Kofi village, to take care of her father's possession. But he refuses. Decides to go back to Ibadan, where he stays and he lives. Same for Wura, who is the second daughter of Yeremi. So both Wura, Alani, and Shaggy, including Woye, the grandson, all leave Yeremi in the village of Kofi to face her life all alone. And of course, after the cap picking ceremony, which was a total embarrassment to the culture of the people of Kufi, to all the men, and all of that. Yeremi was ostracized, is ostracized from the village. She is asked to leave the village, and of course, all the belongings of her husband are confiscated. And she is left alone, all by herself. What lies ahead of Yeremi after all of this experience are lonely days. She has to stay without any of her children, not even her grandson. And ahead of her, she has a lonely days. She has lonely days to suffer. And of course, towards the end of the story, she braces up for what lies ahead. And the story ends there. But then, we have a number of themes. I told you in our last class that the theme of any work of art has got to do with the lessons deducible from the work of art. And of course, there are as many themes as one can derive or as one can find in this work. That's Lonely Days. One of them is the agony of widowhood. Yes. In the land of Kufi, which is of course a microcosm of the entire African continent, we see the suffering of the woman without a man. And of course, it is clear that in Africa, the strength of a woman is found in the man. And that is why at the age of 25, 30, a woman is yet to be married, people begin to raise their eyebrow. What's your problem? You need to get a man to be complete, because it is believed that any woman without a man is yet to be complete. And now you have a man and he is dead. Then you are not complete. So the agony of widow, we see what Yeremi had to go through. She loses everything her husband has left for her. What about Dedewi? That's the other widow too in the village of Kufi. Of course, after the death of her husband, she was accused of having killed her husband. And she has to go through a lot, one of which is to sleep by the side of the dead husband, to prove that she does not have a hand in the death of the husband. What about Radeke? She had her head all shaved off, including Fayoyi. She had to confess for a sin she never committed, and that's the sin of the death of the husband. This is the agony of being a widow in the African setting. What about loneliness, which is called a theme? The theme of loneliness and solitude. Yes, that is embodied in the character of Yeremi. After the death of her husband, the death of her husband was enough. The death of the husband of Radeke and all other female characters in that war, those deaths were enough. Enough suffering for these women. But the culture of Kufi put them into more excruciating pain by blaming them for the death of their husband.